just see an end date here at some point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. In other college football news, Kevin Steele named the defensive coordinator at Alabama. I'm wondering how Bama fans, if there's any Bama fans in the chat, feel about this. Overall, Craig, I would assume that they're kind of ho-humming. I mean, he's been on the staff before. He's been coaching them before, and that was fine. But they didn't win any of their national championships with Kevin Steele there, although not that it was his fault. It's just one of those things that are there. And he does, and the top 5 today is about Kevin Steele. But he has one of the strangest, most, kind of when you look at his career, roundabout coaching careers in football. It's kind of wild. Some of the stuff that he's been attached to or part of or all that. And he's the DC at Alabama now. So it's Tommy Rees and it's Kevin Steele. And I'm not sure how Bama fans feel about all that. I think you have to trust in Saban. But I thought Kevin Steele was a bit of an underwhelming defensive coordinator choice. I mean, I like the Tommy Rees one that he's a young and upcomer, but Kevin Steele's kind of been everywhere.
Yeah, but, I mean, I'd say there's a reason he's been everywhere, right? I mean, it's not like he's been ho-humming around at, Towson and then going to McMurray State and, finding his way through the JUCO leagues and then, he's been Alabama, Auburn, Miami. I mean, he's not – coaches aren't dumb, Paul. Yeah. He's getting jobs for a reason. And, Mario Cristobal's starting his, big – rebuild of the Miami Hurricanes program, and who's the guy he looks to? He looks to Kevin Steele. Nick Saban's trying to get back to business. What's he do? He turns to Kevin Steele again. Turns to Kevin Steele. So, I mean, I think that there's just a bad Baylor taste in the mouth whenever Kevin Steele's brought up, and it's kind of unfair to him. He sucked as a head coach, no doubt about it. Nobody around here really has many great memories of the Kevin Steele era, and why would they? But since then, and then being a really long time ago now at this point, he's gone on to be one of the most, talked about and widely respected assistant coaches in all of the entire sport of college football. I mean, he's been on big elite program staffs with big-time head coaches. Would I hire him as my head coach? Absolutely not. But will I trust Nick Saban's judgment in hiring him as his defensive coordinator? Absolutely, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. I think what people are looking for is splashy names. And when they don't get splashy names, they're like, this hire sucks or this is underwhelming. Underwhelming is fair, but it also depends on who you're talking to. Like, are we talking to the same people that thought Cliff Kingsbury was going to be OC and then they're disappointed when it's Todd Rees? Or are we talking to people who kind of threw out some of the similar names and they just really didn't want Kevin Steele? I don't know. I was underwhelmed, I think, like most everybody, because it's a retread name, and it's a name, like I said, that doesn't necessarily have the most, cachet or, I guess, excitement attached to it. But, the resume is the resume, and he's been all over the SEC. I mean, all over. Every program practically in the SEC, it seems like, has hired him at one point or another. Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama on more than one occasion, so on. And so he knows the lay of the land, and yeah, it's a bit of a return to yesteryear in so many ways for Alabama. I definitely think when you're talking about replacing 2 coordinators and you're, not winning national titles, that there's reason to kind of suddenly be like, well, what's going on here? But yeah, I mean, not a splashy hire by any means, not a super exciting hire, but I think just, a sign that Bama's just getting back to not worrying so much about splashy. Not that they ever worry too much about that, but this is something that Saban's familiar with, comfortable with, and I think a guy who knows the lay of the land. And so, we'll see how it goes. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seemed like a lot of the bigger names were on the offensive side of things. As far as the splashier names, I don't know how splashy it really got on the defensive coordinator side. But yeah, this isn't one that makes you go, off running around in celebration, spinning your shirt over your head if you're a Bama fan. But there's enough familiarity there that I think you understand they're like, yeah, this guy can help us win some football games. And hopefully he does, along with Tommy. I think I said Todd Rees a second ago. I was thinking Todd Rees and Tommy Rees. Hopefully they, get us back to the promised land because, for Alabama, they're supposed to be in that bad boy every single year. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a little bit of departure here watching Georgia go and sit on their throne and take ownership of it. But yeah, I think especially around here, it's just you hear the name Kevin Steele, and it's like, oh my gosh, like that's the worst dude ever. And he's done a lot since the very dark Baylor tenure.
He has.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make it sound like that, although I do bring it up. I have a top 5 out of him because his career is so kind of wild. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he was, but I will tell you this, and looking into it, because I was going to do a top 5 one way about Kevin Steele, and it actually turned out to be another. But I will give you one little factoid from it. So he was the linebackers coach at Nebraska from 89 to 1994 and won a national championship ring in 1994. He has since worked at Florida State, LSU, Auburn, Clemson, Bama, and LSU.
Here's his resume.
But let me tell you, he hasn't won a national championship at any of those,
yeah.
But he has been, I don't know if he's like a ground layer for that, but like right after he leaves is when they do.
Since he left Baylor after an awful tenure as head coach, linebackers at Florida State, DC at Bama, assistant head coach, inside linebackers, Bama, Clemson, DC, and linebackers for 3 years, Alabama director of player personnel, Alabama linebackers in 2014, LSU defensive coordinator and linebackers for a year, Auburn defensive coordinator for 5 years, Auburn interim head coach defensive coordinator for another year. I guess that overlapped that 2020 season. Tennessee interim head coach for
10 days.
Miami defensive coordinator last year. So, I mean, these are programs that have all struggled here recently. Yeah. They're all kind of trying to find their rise. And you're right. Maybe he's just like the patchwork guy. No, and maybe that's what Saban's doing. But
I don't think, like, patchwork's not. But, like, I think what his thing – and it's kind of weird for him because he has had, like, if you look at all those teams that won national titles after he left, most of them won it, like, almost immediately. Like, Alabama won – boom, boom, immediately after he left twice. And so he's clearly good at laying the groundwork. And then I don't know if it's him or whatever, unfortunately, because coaches are kind of wandering souls, right? He leaves and they get a ring, but he could have almost as many as Nick Saban does based on all the places he's been that have won. It's just like right after he goes. Now, LSU was 2015, so that was 4 years later. So there might have been a couple guys that he went and recruited that were key cogs in that machine. But for the most part, that was already gone. But if you look everywhere else he's been, they've kind of won right after he left, I'm not saying they won because he left. I'm saying they won because he was gone. All right, we have to break here because the fire department wants to talk to us. The building's not on fire, but at least I don't think it is.
I get that it's not an exciting hire. I get it, but I don't think Saban's dumb.
No, I don't
that's kind of where I sit with everything.
But yeah, I think like that's why Kevin Steele, it's just kind of unlucky, I guess, when he leaves. Like then the big thing happens, and then he comes back and he leaves again, and then the big thing happens. So, but that was my point about Kevin Steele. It's kind of an interesting thing. When we come back, we'll talk more about why the fire department's in here for sure, and I want